We've already explored what Yugi Muto's Duelist Kingdom deck would look like as Magic the Gathering cards, but what about Duelist Kingdom's main villain, Maximillion Pegasus? This aristocratic antagonist with a taste for toons uses a total of 33 cards that we see this season. 10 normal monsters, 3 effect monsters, 4 toon monsters, 1 ritual monster, 1 fusion monster, 9 spells, and 5 traps. Get comfortable as we explore the creator of Duel Monsters deck through the lens of MTG, and be sure to subscribe for more Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh videos just like this one. Pegasus would have 3 purely vanilla creatures in his deck, starting off with an artifact creature, Bickery Box. For 4 generic and 1 black mana, this would be a 5/4 artifact creature clown toy. Don't get this thing wound up. Toon Alligator would be a 2/4 crocodile for 2 generic and 1 blue. No, alligators aren't technically crocodiles, but Magic has let this slide in the past. And third, for a card that will prove much more impactful to Pegasus's deck, there's Thousand Eyes Idol, a 0/1 eye horror for a single black mana. More on this creature later in the video. For the French vanilla creatures, those with keyword abilities, will start things off with Illusionist Faceless Mage. When Pegasus isn't dueling with toons, he's dueling with far more disturbing monsters, and this mage is no exception. In Magic, it would be a 3/5 Illusion Wizard for 3 generic and 2 black with the keyword ability Fear. Since this keyword is pretty rare and hasn't appeared in a long time, Fear means a creature can only be blocked by black or artifact creatures. Killer Needle might not have fear, but it's no less scary. As a 3/2 insect for 3 generic and 1 black, it sports flying and death touch, making it plenty frightening to face off against. But this is far from the only flyer in Maximillion's arsenal. For 3 generic and 1 white mana, he can summon Flying Elephant, a 4/3 elephant with, you guessed it, flying. Side note, the real version is an effect monster with an instant win condition, but the anime version was just a vanilla. Rounding out the airborne monsters is Parrot Dragon, a 5/3 bird dragon for 4 generic and 1 red. Pegasus is famous for his love of cartoons stemming from his childhood spent watching the animated escapades of a non-copyright infringing rabbit called Funny Bunny. As an homage to his greatest source of childhood entertainment, he created the monster known as Dark Rabbit. Although it has no effect, its flavor text suggests it has cartoonish speed. So Dark Rabbit would be a rabbit for 3 generic and 1 black with haste. I know this is unusual for black, but it's not unheard of. See Clackbridge Troll, Manor Skeleton, Crazed Scourge from the 90s, and others. I thought this was more of a jump scare kind of haste than a passionate red charging into battle kind, hence the black color befitting its name. Speaking of cartoons, 2 of Pegasus's normal monsters would be transformed into toons through the magic of Toon World, but more on all that in a moment. Red Archery Girl is a 3/3 merfolk archer, only the second of her kind for 3 generic and 1 blue. She also has reach, given her bow and arrow. And to cap off the French vanillas, we come to Ryuran, the dragon monster hiding in its own egg. This would cost 6 generic and 1 red for a 5/6 dragon egg with Defender. Before we tackle the effect monsters, if you're liking this video so far, I have a couple more waiting to be made. Would you rather see Kaiba's Duelist Kingdom deck as MTG cards or Joey's Duelist Kingdom deck? If this video reaches 400 likes first, I'll do Kaiba's deck next in the series, and if it hits 200 comments first, I'll do Joey's deck next instead. Now back to Pegasus. Dark Eyes Illusionist ups the stakes with a powerful ability. In the anime, its effect reads, monsters that attack this card are paralyzed, becoming unable to attack again. The real-life card is a flip monster that prevents one enemy monster from attacking while Dark Eyes is on the field. In Magic, this 0/3 Illusion Wizard costing 1 blue and 1 black mana has the following ability. When Dark Eyes Illusionist blocks or becomes blocked by a creature, remove that creature from combat, tap it, and put a stun counter on it. This deck uses a variety of strategies from unblockable beatsticks to vexing evaders like the aforementioned Illusionist, but Pegasus was equally happy to blow things up. Jigen Bakudan, called Time Bomber in Japanese, has a slightly different effect in the anime than in the TCG. In the anime, it blows up all monsters on the field and both players take damage equal to the attack points of their own destroyed monsters. In the actual game, it destroys one's own monsters and inflicts half the total attack as damage to your opponent. Splitting the difference, Jigen Bakudan is an artifact creature construct and it has Suspend 2. When it enters the battlefield, destroy all creatures you control, then Jigen Bakudan deals damage to target opponent equal to the combined power of all creatures destroyed this way. Whether he's slinging tunes, mesmerizing the enemy with illusion magic, or blowing up the field entirely, Pegasus is always out to subvert expectations. As dragons have long been considered some of the strongest beasts in the game, the Dragon Capture Jar was another tool he employed to keep the enemy guessing. The real card just changes dragons to defense mode, but the anime version, well, captured them. The MTG version would be an artifact costing 7 generic mana. When it enters the battlefield, exile all dragon creatures. When it leaves the battlefield, it returns all dragons to the battlefield under their owner's control. But Dragon Capture Jar reaches its full potential with the Dragon Piper. Once again, its real-life effect is super boring, but the anime version allowed it to call forth dragons sealed in the aforementioned jar. Dragon Piper would be a 0/4 legendary Cyclops Druid with Defender. By tapping it, you may cast a card that was exiled by a card you control named Dragon Capture Jar. You may spend mana of any color to cast it, but you can only use this once per turn at sorcery speed. Take that, Tarkir decks. Before we get into the Toon monsters, we should first take a look at the spell cards that Pegasus wields, one of which is key to his Toon strategy. But we're starting with Doppelganger, or as it's called in the real TCG, Mimicat. The real-life card stipulates that you have to control Toon World as well as a Toon monster, but in the anime, this spell card simply allowed Pegasus to copy a card already used by the opponent. In Magic, this would be a sorcery for 3 generic and 2 blue. Target a card an opponent controls or in an opponent's graveyard. Copy that card. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Then there's Eye of Illusion. The anime effect is a little, yikes, but the basic gist is that it's all about taking control of an enemy monster if you control an illusion monster. This card actually got a real-life release relatively recently last year, and it has a number of different effects, but we're going to focus on the anime effect today. Given that temporary creature stealing is very red in Magic, Eye of Illusion would be a sorcery for 2 and 1 red. Gain control of target creature an opponent controls until end of turn. Untap that creature, it gains haste until end of turn. Cast this spell only if you control an illusion creature. Pegasus was just as prepared to deal with an enemy spell card as he was to cast one of his own. Magical Neutralizing Force Field vaguely nullifies the effects of spell cards when activated, so the MTG iteration would be an instant for 1 generic and 1 blue. Counter target sorcery spell. For the rest of this turn, players can't cast sorcery spells. And what would an old school deck be without an Anthem-like effect to boost creature stats across the board? Negative energy doubles the attack of all dark monsters in play for a turn. While wholesale buffs are pretty rare in black, this would have to be a sorcery for 3 generic and 2 black, making it a bit more expensive than it might be in other colors. Black creatures get +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is their power. And for the final sorcery in Maximillion's deck, we revisit Polymerization. In a previous video, I made this a Wooburg sorcery for flavor reasons a la Fusion Elemental, and so as not to give favoritism to any one color over others. While it might make sense to be Simic or Dimir flavor-wise, we have to remember that there are fusions of all attributes. Commenters helpfully pointed out that I could just go in the opposite direction. Instead of making it all colors, it could just be a generic sorcery in the vein of lesson sorceries from Strixhaven. For 2 generic mana, you can sacrifice and or discard 2 or more creatures, then put 1 creature card from your hand or library onto the battlefield under your control that has the corresponding creatures in its fusion cost. Now we move on to enchantments, of which Pegasus would have 2. The first would be his lesser-known Shine Palace, which boosts an equipped light monster's attack by 700. This would be an aura for 1 white. Enchanted white creature gets +2/+0. Pretty straightforward. And you had to see this one coming, one of the most iconic cards Pegasus has ever played, Toon World. The real-life spell simply states that it costs 1,000 life points to activate, and nothing else. As you probably know though, this spell card is required to use any of your Toon monsters, which we'll get into shortly. In Magic, this would be a Toon Kindred enchantment for 1 generic and 1 black mana. As an additional cost to cast this spell, pay 3 life. Each time a Toon creature you control attacks, note how much life you paid. When Toon World leaves the battlefield, you gain 3 life plus life equal to the life you paid to declare attacks with Toon creatures. Believe it or not, in the anime, Toon World's effect allowed the user to recoup life points lost from attacking Toon monsters, but real-life cards are rarely as cool or useful as their anime counterparts. Toon monsters were the very first overpowered archetype of the game, at least in the context of Duelist Kingdom, so they were all given the equivalent of summoning sickness and a cost of 500 life points to attack in an attempt to balance their frightening power. For as formidable as Pegasus's Toon strategy was, you might be surprised to learn that he only used a total of 4 Toon monsters in Duelist Kingdom. It should also be noted that these were more so toonified versions of existing monsters than separate cards in their own right. For the sake of simplicity and faithfulness to the real-life game, we'll make them standalone cards, starting with one of the most infamous Toon monsters of all time, Blue Eyes Toon Dragon. In the real-life game, Toon monsters share a few similarities. They must be special summoned, can't attack the turn they're summoned, require 500 life points in order to attack, and can attack your opponent directly if they control no Toon monsters. In Magic, Blue Eyes Toon Dragon would be a legendary Toon Dragon costing 6 generic, 1 white, and 1 blue. It would be an 8/7 with flying and Toon logic. This Universes Beyond style keyword is a catch-all for Toon creature pros and cons. Toon monsters enter tapped with a stun counter on them, signifying that they have to wait longer than their counterparts to attack, just like in Yu-Gi-Oh! If you don't control a card named Toon World, sacrifice this creature. Non-Toon creatures can't block this creature. You must pay 2 life to attack with this creature. The other 3 Toons in Pegasus's deck would follow the same basic formula. Mangaryuran is another legendary Toon Dragon for 6 generic and 1 red, a 5/6 just like its ordinary counterpart. Toon Mermaid would be the same as Red Archery Girl with the exception of having Toon logic. And for a throwback to an earlier video in this series, Toon Summon Skull would cost 3 generic and 3 black for a 6/3 legendary Toon Demon with flying and trample. As we've already seen, Toons aren't the only monsters in Pegasus's arsenal. In fact, his strategy gets even scarier once his more mischievous minions are vanquished and he's forced to get serious. No monster exemplifies this better than Relinquished. This level 1 Dark Spellcaster lets you equip 1 enemy monster to it per turn to take on that monster's attack and defense. Then, if Relinquished would be destroyed by battle, that stolen monster is destroyed instead. Your opponent also takes any battle damage from battles involving Relinquished. To translate this monster as faithfully as possible, we'll need to make some adjustments to its effect to make it fit into Magic the Gathering's rule set. Relinquished would be a legendary wizard horror with a mana cost of 1 black. However, as with ritual monsters covered previously, rather than having the associated ritual spell card, it would have the ritual keyword ability. Instead of paying this card's mana cost, you sacrifice creatures whose mana costs contain at least 1 black mana. A little clunky on a 1-cost creature, but I think incorporating colored mana is an important tweak to this custom mechanics design. When Relinquished enters, its power and toughness become equal to the power and toughness of target creature an opponent controls. Then that creature loses all types and abilities and becomes an aura enchanting Relinquished with, if enchanted creature would die, it gains indestructible until end of turn, then sacrifice this aura. Whenever Relinquished is dealt combat damage, it deals that much damage to that source's controller. As daunting as Relinquished would be to face off against after having absorbed your biggest and best creature, its fused form is even more powerful, but we'll cover that one in a moment. First, we have to touch on the 5 trap cards in Pegasus's deck. Gorgon's Eye is a normal trap card that negates the effects of defense position monsters for a turn, or as the anime effect puts it, petrifies them. This would be a simple enough adaptation and instant for 2 and 1 blue. Tapped creatures your opponents control lose all abilities until end of turn. Prophecy would be a little trickier. This card never actually made it to the real-life card game, but its anime effect was this. Select 1 random card in your opponent's hand and predict whether its attack is over, under, or equal to 2000. If you predict correctly, you can add that card to your hand. After some tweaking, Prophecy would be an instant for 1 generic and 1 blue mana. Choose a card in your opponent's hand at random and predict if it has power greater than, less than, or equal to 5. Then your opponent reveals that card. If you called it correctly, add that card to your hand. Also an anime exclusive card, Tears of a Mermaid has the following effect. Activates the moment your opponent's face down card becomes face up. Any foe's attack becomes surrounded and neutralized. For 1 blue, tap target creature that was turned face up this turn. Would this be any useful against Duskmourn decks or any other card flipping strategies? Let me know in the comments. Actually, Pegasus had a lot of anime exclusive cards, including Trap Displacement. This trap card switches the target of an opponent's trap card, so this would cost 2 blue in Magic. Counter target instant spell that targets you or a permanent you control, then copy that spell and target that spell's controller or a permanent they control. And lastly, Sun Shower costs 1 and 2 white. Destroy all zombies. Kind of a random inclusion in this deck, and we never see it used, but Pegasus did have it. And finally, at long last, the moment all of you still watching have been waiting for. What do you get when you cross a monster-absorbing horror with an eldritch idol covered in hideous eyes? You get Thousand Eyes Restrict. This monster has all the benefits of Relinquished with a twist. Other monsters can't attack or change their battle positions. Thousand Eyes Restrict would of course be a fusion of Relinquished and Thousand Eyes Idol. Given the 4 cards needed to pull this off even in MTG, it's a significantly steeper investment for this added ability. Thousand Eyes Restrict would also be a 0/0 for 1 black that absorbs an enemy creature as an ETB and uses it as a meat shield, but it would also have other creatures cannot tap or attack. And there you have the creator of Duel Monsters deck ported into MTG. If you're still watching and if you'd like to see more of this series, vote by liking or commenting below. Again, if this video reaches 400 likes first, I'll cover Kaiba's Duelist Kingdom deck next, and if it reaches 200 comments first, I'll do Joey's Duelist Kingdom deck next instead. Either way, hope to see you all in the next video, and as always, thanks for watching.